welcome to the Big Bear Homestead. Today, we're going to get back to doing what I know how to do best, and that's not follow any directions and still make something absolutely magnificent. So today, we're going to make my version of twice baked potatoes. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about this recipe. I know most of you know that I wasn't always the best cook. When I was in high school, I had parents and nannies who cooked for me, so I never had to learn how to cook. Then I got off to college, and it wasn't until my sophomore, junior year that I had to start cooking for myself. Well, fast forward about a year and a half later, I was actually pregnant with Blaze, and my dad was living with me. And he loved to fry bacon. And some pregnant women, they can't stand the smell of bacon. Well, I wasn't one of those. I absolutely loved bacon. I actually went and bought him one of those electric skillets that you could plug in, and you could just put the whole pan, the whole pot of bacon, or the pound of bacon, into the pan and just let it cook. And it would just permeate throughout the house, and it smelled so good. Well, the problem was, you can't eat just a pound of bacon, or at least I couldn't. I'd get sick if I just ate the whole thing. So we started coming up with different things that we could use the bacon for. Well, lo and behold, my dad knew how to make twice baked potatoes. Never knew this, didn't even really know what they were. And so one day, he was in the kitchen and he made them, and I ate them, and I was like, this is absolutely fantastic. What is this? And he told me it was twice baked potatoes. And so I started paying more attention, learning what he was putting in it and how he was fixing it and preparing it. And lo and behold, I figured out my own way to do it, because at one point I couldn't even really remember what all he put in there. So I started thinking, well, what would I put in there? And started adding ingredients and playing with different things how I prepared certain things. And as far as my family's concerned, they're the best tasting ones they've ever had. Okay, so let's talk ingredients. There's some main staples that you obviously are going to need for twice baked potatoes. Duh, potatoes, right? But that's where the recipe kind of changes a little bit. You can use milk, or you could use sour cream to thicken up your potatoes once you get them mashed and ready to go back into the skins. Sometimes I use ranch dressing. You can use mushrooms. Some people don't like mushrooms, but our family does. So you can mix this up, but I'm going to tell you how the ingredients that we put in them, and just have fun. Mix them up. Change things around a little bit and see what you like and what you don't like. So first of all, obviously, we're going to need potatoes. We're using 5 potatoes because there's 5 of us. This little small one is for my little Ladeza. We're also going to need an onion, and we'll also need green onions, which we're going to chop the tops off for chives. And you can use the bottoms if you'd like to actually, instead of putting the regular onion in there, but I'm just going to use the tops for the chives for right now. You'll need 12 ounces to a 16-ounce packet of bacon, about a pound to a pound and a half of cheddar cheese, shredded, 1 8-ounce package of mushrooms. Again, if you don't want that many, that's fine. Some people don't like them. You can leave them out if you'd like. You're going to need butter, obviously, garlic, minced garlic, and sour cream. Okay, only a few housekeeping things to do today. 1, go ahead and preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, you're going to want to take your potatoes and wash them off thoroughly, getting all the dirt off of them if there's any on there, and then leave them wet, because when we put them into the oven, that water will help with the moisture when they're cooking. Okay, so the timer's gone off. That means the oven is preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So now it's time for us to take these and put them straight into the oven. Okay, now that we've put the potatoes into the oven, now it's time to really get busy, because there's a lot of chopping and cutting and frying to get all of the stuff that you're going to put into the mixture ready for when the potatoes come out of the oven. So the very first thing I always do is I go ahead and cook my bacon. So we'll go ahead and get that in the pan, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so our bacon is just about done. So I'm going to put it into a container to let it sit and cool off a little bit, because when you're ready for the bacon, you're actually going to chop it up. So I like to get mine a little crisper, and that way I can just break it up into pieces and I don't have to bring out my cutting board, because you really don't want to get all that grease on your cutting board. Now, with the grease, you're going to want to drain off some of it, but you want to leave enough to cook the next ingredients in. Okay, so now, after we've cooked the bacon and we've drained off some of the grease, we're going to use the rest of the grease to cook our onions and our mushrooms. So go ahead, and obviously you'll want to chop up your mushrooms and dice your onions, and go ahead and put those in that onion or in that bacon grease. Okay. All right. And may I suggest, if you have an exhaust fan, go ahead and turn it on, because it'll get quite, I don't even know what the right word is, tear-provoking. It's going to get a little rough in here. So we're going to go ahead and cook these onions, and then we'll put in the, and also garlic, guys. We're going to put garlic in as well, too. So give me just a few minutes, and we'll be right back. Okay, so the onions are just about translucent. So before they get caramelized, what we'll do is go ahead and put in our mushrooms. Okay. And we're going to let those cook down for about a minute or so. Once they start to get soft, then I'm going to go ahead and add in the minced garlic and let it all simmer for maybe about 5 minutes. Okay, so it's been about an hour. We went ahead and took our potatoes out. Now they are still kind of warm to the touch. This is where you get that whole hot potato from, because you really don't want to hold on to them for too long. So what I do is I normally just have a dish towel or something. These are not dirty, I promise, they're stained. So I go ahead and hold on to them, and then you want to cut them in half long ways, so that you have like 2 long halves. So I just cut through the middle. And you'll see as that steam comes out, it's pretty hot. Now, I always do these hot, and I think the reason for that, to be quite honest, is because everybody is always waiting for these things to be done. They don't last very long around here, so everybody's always like, you know, as soon as they start to smell the bacon and then they smell the potatoes baking in the oven, they just know that it's almost time for twice baked potatoes. So I always end up having to do these hot. So basically just kind of open them up, let them cool off just a little bit, and we'll be back in just a second. Okay, so the next step is to get all of the potato out of the actual skin and into the bowl. So I just use a regular teaspoon, and I get maybe like 1/8 of an inch, and I just start scooping. And the thing is that there's a lot of people that do things differently with twice baked potatoes. Some people leave a lot on the edge, but I'm not one of those people, because of course I don't follow directions, right? But what happens when you do that is sometimes you end up with a potato that looks like that, where you can barely see all you've got is the skin. Like, that's my finger going right through there. So you have to be careful. And occasionally you'll have that, but it's okay because really that's just a shell. You're going to fill it with this yummy goodness, and you're not really going to care about that. So you're going to go ahead and scoop out the rest of these. You can see I've done this a lot. So, and occasionally I do. See, I get overzealous and I get all the way to the skin. And then you're going to put them into a baking dish and kind of let those skins sit, and they'll start to get a little firm just as they dry a little bit. And then our next step is we're going to add in all of the yummy goodness. Now, normally when you're doing like mashed potatoes, you would use milk. Well, I used to use milk, but I found that I really liked the taste of ranch dressing. So one time I didn't have milk, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I went ahead and I grabbed the ranch dressing, and I really liked it. And then I started to realize that ranch dressing, when you try to make it, you normally put sour cream in, right? So I thought, well, maybe instead of the ranch dressing, I'll just put the sour cream in there instead. So usually the first thing I do is I get a little bit of butter, and I would say maybe about 3 tablespoons for this batch. So let's see what that does. We may add more. We'll see what happens. Cut it up into a couple pieces. See what happens. Okay. And then for the sour cream, I normally put in probably, this is a 16-ounce container. I'm probably going to put in almost half of it. So probably about 6 to 8 ounces. We'll see what happens with that. Yeah, about half. I would say about 8 ounces. So kind of mix that up a little bit. And of course, we're going to mash it in just a minute. But I like to kind of stir it up in there to get the butter to start melting. Because remember, if you do this when everything is hot, it'll naturally melt everything. So, okay, so I have that. Let me get my potato masher out, and we'll mash these up pretty good. Now, some people will whip your potatoes. I don't really like them whipped. I mean, I know when you see these pretty pictures, like you'll see these magazines, cooking magazines, or these cooking shows, and they'll pan across and you'll see this beautiful, like they'll take the filling and they put it inside a Ziploc bag and then they pipe it in there and it looks all nice and pretty. Not happening here. They eat them way too fast for me to have to try to work that hard to do it. Okay, so this is mashed up pretty good. And I'm going to tilt the bowl so that you can see the consistency. Okay, so it's still kind of choppy. Okay, now the next thing I like to do is, most of the time people put the cheese on the top, but I actually like to put a little bit in the actual bowl, or into the mixture. So I kind of put maybe a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup into that mixture, and we'll see how that works. Now, one thing I'll tell you, one of the reasons I really like making these is because obviously the amount of stuffing that you're going to have is way more than what you started with, because, I mean, you're adding to what was inside of the potato, right? So you're going to have a little bit more. So what I always do is I make sure to taste test the filling before I put it into the potatoes so that I know that it tastes just right, right? So, okay, so we mix that up in there really good. And you'll see as the potatoes are starting to cool, that cheese is not melting completely. And that's really important because you don't want it to just completely melt into the potatoes. You still want it to have a little bit of integrity so that when you put it into the potatoes and then put it in the oven, that's when it'll melt. And that is fantastic. Okay, so next step is our bacon. And remember, I told you I like my bacon nice and crispy, so that all I have to do is, instead of chopping it, I can just crumble it into my mixture. Okay. Some of this we'll leave behind for the men folk in the house. They really like the bacon. I have a couple pieces that didn't get cooked all the way through, but you can always tear them. I mean, why dirty up an extra knife? You can always tear them up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mix this stuff up together, and then we'll be back in just a moment to go ahead and put all of the other mushrooms and stuff together. Okay, so we're done with the bacon. Go ahead and mix that up, and we'll add the onions, mushrooms, and garlic. Okay, and I intentionally do not drain this. I let the bacon grease sit in the mixture, and there's a reason for that, because that little bit of extra bacon grease actually adds a really, really good flavor to your potatoes. So we'll go ahead and just stir that all in, and once it's all mixed in really well, we'll start filling our potatoes. Okay, so now that we have everything mixed together, this is the part I was talking about before, where I like to taste test it a little bit just to make sure that everything's right. Because we put the onion and the bacon grease and everything in there, I don't normally have to season a lot, but sometimes I like to put just a little bit of kosher salt and some black pepper in there just to kind of spice it up a little bit. So let's see what we got. Yeah, we need a little bit, just a little bit of salt. Maybe about, I would say maybe a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half. And I use kosher salt. It just seems to do better, especially with the potatoes. And maybe like a half a teaspoon of black pepper. Mix that together and see if that works. And again, this part right here, you should never have a recipe that tells you how something's supposed to taste. When you taste it, if it tastes pleasing to you, then that's what you use. That's why Jason gets so frustrated with me, is a lot of times I don't write down the amounts that I use, and it tastes different every time. But the great thing about that is it always tastes good to me, so I'm not worried about it. Okay, let's try this one more time. Now we're ready. Okay, so we're gonna take the stuffing and put it into the potatoes. Now, if you're cooking for a bunch of people, obviously don't do what I did. I'm cooking for my family, so I'm not worried about using the same spoon that I ate out of. So you're just gonna take one of your shells and you'll fill it in, and just kind of, you don't want to pack it too tough, but you still want to kind of pack them in there, because you want these to have a little bit of integrity to them, so that as they bake, you know, they kind of come back to their original form of being a baked potato. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fill these up, and I'll be back with you in just a moment. Okay, so the last step before we put them in the oven is to cover them with cheese. And one word that I would put, if I were going to type this out as a recipe, I would use the word liberally. It's the only time it's good to be liberal. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, go ahead and do this liberally. Put it all over, even almost like a casserole. Go ahead and just spread it all over, because, I mean, who doesn't love cheese? So, go ahead and spread that on there. And then when we're done with that, we're going to go ahead and put it in the oven. And we're going to, it's probably, if you left your oven on at 400, it's probably going to take about maybe 15 to 20 minutes. You're going to watch for the cheese to melt on top, and you'll start to see that you'll see like the heat coming off of them. You want to make sure that they're heated through, because there's nothing worse than eating a twice baked potato that's only half baked. Okay, so get all this cheese in here. And then we'll go ahead and put it in the oven. Okay, so now for the moment of truth. We took them out of the oven and we've let them cool. Now, let me show you what they look like when they come out of the oven. Do you see how the cheese has bubbled up and started to brown a little bit? Now, granted, with a little bit of extra cheese on there, and there's some baked on the bottom. I don't know if you've ever had baked cheese that's just sticking to the bottom of the pan. That's like probably the best part of this whole recipe sometimes. So what I like to do is when I am serving these, I will garnish with a little bit of chopped chives. Fresh is always better than the stuff that you get in a can, but if that's all you've got, then you can do that too. But I like to just put a little bit of chives on these, and we'll try one real quick and see how they taste before I let everybody else know that they're done, because that's dangerous. This place turns into like a huge traffic zone as soon as I let everybody know. Okay. All right. So let's see how these taste. Let's see if I can get one out. And see, this pan that I bought, I absolutely love it. I got it at old Wally World. But like even the cheese is like pulling off the bottom, and I didn't put anything on it. But look at that piece of cheese, it just came off. It's awesome. All right, they're kind of stuck together a little bit, but that is okay. Again with the baked cheese, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to eat you. You better let go. Get over it. Okay. All right. So, moment of truth. Let's see how they turned out. Man. I'm telling y'all, every time I make these, I surprise myself. They always taste a little bit different, but they always have that really rich flavor to them. And the bacon grease is just what kind of tops it all off, because when you put those onions, because a lot of people will put their onions in not cooked. And if that's the texture you like, that's fine. But I really like the little bit of mushroom taste that's in there, kind of gives a little bit of a smoky taste. And we used sharp cheddar, which also gives it that more rich taste. So I'm glad you were able to come with me today, and I'm glad I was able to share my version of the twice baked potatoes with you. If you're new to our channel, I hope you really enjoyed this and you'll come back again. If you want, go ahead and subscribe to us. If you like this video, go ahead and like it, share it, you know the drill. And like always, have a nice day. Can you hear him? I don't think. You're not going to be able to keep him away from that bacon grease. Go take it and put it in the. Just hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. We got an edit point. Cha cha cha. What you doing? Take the dog so that he can eat his bacon grease. Blah blah. Okay, edit point, and here we